Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you write code, you have probably been haunted by this exact problem at some point. The absolutely infamous Docker Desktop infinite loading screen. So today, we're going to map out your exact options for either fixing your current setup or just leaving it behind entirely. Let's dive right in.
We've all been there, right? You boot up your machine, you're totally ready to code, and instead, you just stare helplessly at that Docker Desktop starting animation forever. It's a shared trauma across the developer community, echoed in countless GitHub and Stack Overflow threads. You get hit with that lingering processes detected error, and your productivity just grinds to an absolute halt.
So you really have to ask yourself, is it time to roll up your sleeves and force this Docker setup to work, or is it finally time to move on to a completely new tool? In this explainer, we're going to validate that frustration you've been feeling, outline the exact technical steps to actually fix Docker, and then explore the absolute best modern alternatives if you're ready to completely evolve your workflow.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover 1. The infinite loading nightmare, 2. Troubleshooting the Docker engine, 3. The clean uninstall strategy, 4. Top Docker desktop alternatives, and 5. Choosing your new workflow. All right, part 1. The infinite loading nightmare. Let's talk about why this tool, which honestly works so well on paper, suddenly brings our machines to a complete standstill. The system impact is the primary pain point here. You might see massive CPU spikes out of nowhere, you get these hard WSL2 crashes on Windows, or you might get hit with the dreaded Docker API context deadline exceeded error. This is usually caused by background processes that just refuse to shut down, WSL2 timeouts, or Docker simply hoarding every ounce of available memory. And, beyond the technical bugs, there's a serious licensing agitation that's pushing people away. Docker Desktop is really only free if your organization has fewer than 250 employees and brings in less than $10 million in annual revenue. Once you cross that line, you are forced into paid subscriptions. And for scaling teams, that's a huge reason to start seeking out alternatives.
Moving on to part 2, troubleshooting the Docker engine.
So if you're stuck on that loading screen on Windows right now and you need an immediate fix to get back to work today, here is your escape hatch. First, open PowerShell as an admin. Go to your Docker resources folder and run the com.docker.diagnosis.exe check command. Step 2 is basically the magic bullet. Just execute WSL-shutdown in PowerShell. That forcefully kills those lingering background processes that are blocking Docker. Finally, step 3, reboot the Docker Desktop app. Usually that sequence brings the engine right back to life. Now, if you want to stop Docker from constantly crashing your machine in the future, you have to mitigate its resource hoarding. You can explicitly restrict its CPU and RAM access in the settings-store.json file or your .wsl config file. Try limiting CPUs to 2 instead of letting it eat all of them. Cap your memory at like 8 gigabytes and set Use Resource Saver to false. This prevents Docker from literally strangling your host OS. Also, if you're on Linux or setting up custom networks, you really need to watch out for silent configuration conflicts. Check your daemon.json file to make sure it isn't clashing with systemd startup scripts, and make sure local DNS caching tools, something like DNS Max, aren't blocking Docker's network interfaces. Honestly, these tiny network conflicts cause hours of totally wasted debugging time. Which brings us to part 3, the clean uninstall strategy. Sometimes troubleshooting just isn't enough. You literally have to burn the configuration to the ground and start completely fresh. But on Windows, just clicking uninstall in your settings is totally insufficient. It leaves so much junk behind. You have to manually delete these hidden app data folders, the .docker folder in your user profile, the Docker folders in roaming app data and local app data, and the program data Docker folder. If you skip this, corrupted configs are just going to infect your fresh install. And the same aggressive approach applies to Mac and Linux users. For Linux, a true clean slate means running actual purge commands, not just remove, and aggressively deleting the var lib docker and containerd directories. You can honestly reclaim tens of gigabytes of disk space just doing that. On a Mac, after using the Troubleshoot uninstall UI, open your terminal and nuke that hidden .docker directory in your home folder. All right, part 4, top Docker desktop alternatives. So let's say you just purged Docker and you want to completely evolve your setup. We're going to look at 4 heavy hitters here: Portainer, Podman, Rancher, and OrbStack. There isn't really a one-size-fits-all answer. It totally depends on what you prioritize. So let's break them down. First up is Podman Desktop. This is absolutely fantastic if you're heavily focused on security. Its standout feature is that it's daemonless, meaning it runs your containers without needing elevated root privileges. That is a massive win for reducing your attack surface. The trade-off, though, it definitely has a steeper learning curve, and the third-party plugin ecosystem just isn't quite as vast as Docker's yet.
Next, we have Rancher Desktop. Now, this offers an incredibly great free graphical interface for local Kubernetes workflows. But if you're an enterprise team, you really need to be careful here because of their recent pricing overhaul. Based on the source data, a 16-core VM on Rancher Prime can now cost you over $19,200 a year for standard support. So amazing for free users, but enterprises, watch your wallets.
Now, if you are running macOS on Apple's Silicon, OrbStack is a literal game changer for performance. People rave about this tool because unlike older systems that just hog massive fixed blocks of memory, OrbStack creates a super lightweight VM with dynamic RAM allocation. It actually grows and shrinks based on what you're using. You get near-instant startup times. The only catch is that there's no Windows or Linux support.
Finally, there's Portainer. Portainer is super unique because it actually replaces that heavy desktop app entirely with a really lightweight browser UI. It's built to govern multiple environments, so Docker, Kubernetes, Podman, all at scale with built-in role-based access control. The main thing to remember is that Portainer is an operational layer. You still have to run a basic underlying runtime engine on your machine to actually power it.
And that brings us to part 5, choosing your new workflow.
Let's summarize all this into a final verdict. If your team demands strict, rootless open-source security, go with Podman. If you need local Kubernetes integration on a tight budget, check out the free version of Rancher. If you're on a Mac and you just want absolute raw speed, OrbStack is 100% your best bet. And if you're scaling an enterprise team across multiple environments, you really should be looking at Portainer.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this one thought. Think about your current setup. Are you actually optimizing your local development environment to build better software? Or have you just sort of accepted a workflow where you spend half your day fighting your own tools? Take back control of your workflow and happy coding.